My original research was the exploration of historic feminist movements in the campaign for gender equality. The suffragette movement paying particular attention to the propaganda banners used, which were predominantly textile-based, created using embroidery and applique methods. I also looked at the 1968 all-female machinist strike from Ford, especially the picket lines and signage used, as well as the leather and leatherette of the interior of the cars, as that was what the women used in their profession. My Unit 1 piece embodied elements from this research. Moving into Unit 2, I wanted to start incorporating wood elements inspired by picket lines from the protests I had previously researched. I didn't want the wood to just be static and two-dimensional and flat. I wanted it to have a contour to complement the way leather works. So after some research, I found out that you can steam bend wood by steaming it in a steam box, and then it becomes soft and you can bend it. So I built a steam box out of a sewage pipe, some dowel, and a wallpaper stripper, which in itself was an artifact. I had in fact made my own tool, and it was an object of interest. Unfortunately, even though the steam box did work, it became clear after testing several times that the steam was actually disintegrating the glue in between the layers of the plywood, causing it to split. So I approached a carpenter and he referred me to a material called flexiply, and it flexes on its own. The only issue with flexiply though is it doesn't hold its own shape, so I had to consider this within my design. I want my artefacts to create conversation around the issue of gender inequalities, so I researched into Native Americans and how they use objects to tell stories, and found that they particularly used talking sticks or speaker staffs, which were a stick passed around groups of people, acting as a symbol of having the authority of being able to talk. From this research, I took note of the illustrations often used created through etching and embroidery, as well as the meaning of such objects. I mocked up my designs in paper first of all, as sometimes three-dimensional designs don't translate from 2D to 3D that well. So after I had established 3 designs I wanted to make, I started hand cutting and laser cutting the panels of each piece, hand finishing them, hand painting them, and hand stitching them, because I really feel that the hand crafted element almost expresses the toil of the women in the feminist movements which I had initially researched. So that was very important to me, kind of paying homage to the craft that was put into the banners of the suffragettes and of the women 1968 striking from Ford, who had hand painted their signs. The inspiration for the forms of the pieces are interpretations of genitalia and elements of the human form to symbolise the only true difference between genders. Together I feel the wood and the leather work very successfully. They complement each other, as well as the juxtaposition looks really interesting and new. And then the leather, it's on its own, really expresses the handcraft element, which I really wanted to achieve. These pieces I really want to be interactive, so moving forward into the final pieces, they'll have writing emblazoned onto them, so the viewer or the audience can explore them, read them, and pass it on to other audience members or other friends, participants viewing the pieces. With regards to the surface design, I took inspiration again from the suffragette propaganda, especially their handkerchiefs, as well as Oliver Ruger, Sarah Lucas, Rosaline White and Keith Haring, who were all very graphic illustrators. My personal handwriting has been somewhat graphic in the past, and I have done graphic design in the past, and I have a strong affiliation with CAD work. Therefore, moving forward, I took inspiration from these references and decided to laser etch and laser cut all of my surface designs, as I felt this paid homage to my background. My third prototype is a series of surface design samples. So I've sampled in laser etching onto plywood, laser etching onto leather, adding colour to those laser etches using paint, which is found quite effective and something I do carry forward into some other samples. I also laser cut stitch holes to stitch an illustration, which you can see here in this sample, where I used applique as well as embroidery into wood, which gave a really nice juxtaposition of materials. I decided to bring forward the adding of the colour into the etching, so I tried it with acrylic paint and silicone. Some of the samples came through very successfully. So again, I tried laser etching text into plywood to see how that would look. And then I moved it forward by laser etching, laser cutting and embroidering plywood, as well as varnishing it. I feel adding colour to the plywood pushes it forward, takes it away from it being a crude material and into something that can be quite polished. So I embroidered leather as well, testing different colours together, specifically monochrome colours, as representative of binary, and how social conditioning has taught us that gender is very black and white when in reality it isn't. Again, I added colour to the laser etching to create a contrast, and with this I particularly loved using white with the contrast of the dark wood. It really picked out the wording, so I tried that in acrylic paint as well as silicone. This newly devised technique will definitely be carried forward. Moving forward into the creation of the final collection, my first objective is to start adding the text and illustration to the forms.